Omolara lived what many believe to be a simple but content life. She was a young mother, barely 28, married to Ayotunde, a man she once thought was her safe place. Their love story had started like something out of a movie. University sweethearts, long walks under the campus trees, and promises whispered in the quiet hours of the night. And when their daughter, little Eniola, was born, Omolara believed that their family was finally complete. Her days were filled with laughter. Eniola's giggles that echoed through their small but cozy apartment, and the steady presence of her best friend, Tolani, who had been by her side since childhood. Tolani was more than a friend. She was like a sister, always there with advice, laughter, and support. Omolara trusted her blindly. But beneath the surface of that perfect picture, small cracks were beginning to show. Ayotunde had become distant, late nights at work, unanswered calls, and excuses that no longer made sense. Omolara told herself it was just the stress of providing for the family, the weight of Lagos living pressing down on him. After all, Ayotunde was a good man. Or so she thought. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights blinked awake, Omolara watched Ayotunde from across the dinner table. He barely looked at her anymore, his attention buried in his phone. Eniola reached out with her tiny hands, calling for her father, but he didn't even notice. Omolara's heart ached. Tolani noticed too. She would often comfort Omolara with words that felt warm, like a soothing balm. "Men go through things, Omolara. Don't think too much about it," she'd say with that reassuring smile that Omolara trusted completely. And Omolara believed her, because why wouldn't she? Tolani was her best friend, the godmother to her child, and the one person who always seemed to understand her pain. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Ayotunde's distance grew into silence, and silence became absence. Omolara's instincts told her something was wrong, but every time she looked at Tolani's comforting face, her fears felt foolish. Then came the night that changed everything. Omolara stood by the window, Eniola asleep in her arms, watching the street below. Ayotunde had not come home again. Her heart whispered a fear she dared not speak. And in that quiet, a strange chill passed through her, the kind that only comes when life is about to turn upside down. Omolara had no idea that the two people she loved most, her husband and her best friend, were hiding a betrayal that would shatter her world and leave her to face life alone with her little girl. And the storm was closer than she could ever imagine. The next morning began like any other. Omolara woke up early, the soft cries of little Eniola pulling her from sleep. She fed her daughter, humming a lullaby her own mother used to sing, before preparing breakfast for Ayotunde. But his side of the bed was still untouched. He hadn't come home. Her chest tightened. She called his phone for the 5th time, and like every other attempt, it went straight to voicemail. "Maybe he's just busy," she whispered to herself, trying to convince her trembling heart. By midday, she decided to call Tolani. Her best friend's voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful when she answered. "Omolara, how are you? How's Eniola?" "I'm fine," Omolara replied weakly. "Ayotunde didn't come home again last night. I'm worried." Tolani sighed softly, the kind of sigh that carried false empathy. "You know these men. Maybe he's just working late. Don't overthink it, my sister." But as Tolani spoke, Omolara's heart prickled with unease. There was a strange distance in her friend's voice, something she couldn't explain. That evening, determined to get answers, Omolara dressed Eniola in her tiny pink sweater and set out for Ayotunde's office. Lagos traffic was brutal, but the fire in her chest burned hotter than her frustration. When she finally arrived, she was met with the kind of silence that can only exist in an empty office. One of Ayotunde's colleagues, a kind older man named Mr. Adebayo, looked at her with pity. "Ah, Madam Omolara, Ayotunde no de work here again. He resigned 2 months ago." Her breath caught in her throat. "Resigned?" "Yes," Mr. Adebayo nodded. "I thought you knew." The world tilted. 2 months, every late night, every unanswered call, every lie, it all made horrifying sense. Her knees felt weak, but she held on to Eniola's tiny hand like it was her lifeline. Desperate for clarity, she called Tolani again, but this time there was no answer. Later that night, as the city lights blurred through her tears, Omolara made a decision. She grabbed a cab and went straight to Tolani's apartment. She knocked once, twice, then pushed the door open when she realized it was unlocked. And there, in that single, gut-wrenching moment, Her world shattered. Ayotunde was standing in the living room, his arms around Tolani. They looked startled, caught off guard, but not guilty enough to hide. Tolani's expression was cold, almost smug, as if she had been waiting for this confrontation. "Omolara," Ayotunde said, his voice flat, "I didn't want you to find out like this." Her vision blurred with tears. You married my best friend?" Tolani's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We didn't plan it this way, but he chose me." And just like that, the life Omolara had built, her marriage, her trust, her family, crumbled into pieces. Omolara stood frozen, staring at Ayotunde and Tolani. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own voice when she whispered, "After everything, how could you?" Ayotunde didn't flinch. His arms remained around Tolani, as if his decision had already been sealed long ago. "Omolara," he said calmly, "you'll be fine. You're strong. But this is what I want now." The words stabbed her deeper than any knife. Tolani, the woman she once trusted like her own sister, only smirked. "You need to move on, Lara. This isn't good for you." Move on? Those two words echoed in Omolara's head all the way back home. That night, she cried until her tears ran dry, holding Eniola close to her chest. Her little girl looked up with innocent eyes, unaware of the storm their lives had just been thrown into. Days turned into weeks. Ayotunde packed his things and left without a second glance. He married Tolani in a quiet ceremony that the whole neighborhood whispered about. Friends pitied Omolara, but pity didn't pay bills or soothe the ache in her chest. With no one else to turn to, she found herself in a constant struggle. Rent was due, food was running low, and Eniola needed diapers, clothes, and medicine when she fell sick. Every day was a battle between despair and survival. But Omolara refused to break. She started selling homemade snacks by the roadside, waking up at 4 a.m. to fry puff puff and chin chin. Under the scorching Lagos sun, she stood with Eniola strapped to her back, calling out to passers-by, "Puff puff! Fresh puff puff!" People talked. Some mocked her, saying, "See the woman Ayotunde left. What a pity." Others whispered cruel rumors about how she must have failed as a wife. Each word cut deep, but Omolara held her head high. She was no longer living for the world. She was living for her daughter. Late at night, when Eniola was asleep, Omolara would sit by the window, staring at the stars. She remembered the woman she used to be, happy, loved, and secure, and wondered if she would ever feel whole again. But in those quiet hours, she also discovered something new inside her: strength. Every tear hardened into determination. Every insult fueled her will to rise. If Ayotunde thought abandoning her would break her, he was wrong. 3 years passed. 3 years of sleepless nights, endless hustling, and silent prayers. Omolara built a small but steady catering business. Her puff puff became famous in the neighborhood, and her chin chin was ordered in bulk for parties. She moved from barely surviving to standing on her own 2 feet. Yet deep down, she never forgot the betrayal. And she swore one day Ayotunde and Tolani would see the woman they threw away and regret it. 3 years later, Lagos felt different for Omolara. The woman who once cried herself to sleep now walked through the bustling markets with her head held high. Her small catering business, Eniola's Kitchen, named after her daughter, had grown beyond anything she imagined. Orders poured in for weddings, birthdays, and corporate events. Omolara had transformed pain into power. One sunny afternoon, as she packed trays of steaming jollof rice and fried plantain for a client, Eniola ran into the kitchen, her tiny feet pattering against the tiled floor. "Mummy, look what I drew!" Omolara bent down, smiling at her little girl's picture of the two of them holding hands under a bright sun. Her heart swelled. "It's beautiful, my darling," she whispered, hugging her tight. Eniola had become her strength, her reason to keep going. That evening, while delivering an order to a luxurious event hall in Victoria Island, Omolara's world shifted again. She had just finished arranging the trays on the buffet table when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Omolara?" She froze, slowly she turned, and there stood Ayotunde. He looked nothing like the proud man who had left her. His once immaculate suits were replaced with a crumpled shirt, and his confident demeanor had been replaced by something else: desperation. Beside him was Tolani, no longer glowing with triumph, but looking worn, bitter, and angry. Omolara's chest tightened, but she stood her ground. "What do you want?" Ayotunde's eyes darted away in shame. "Lara, things didn't work out. Tolani and it's over. I made a mistake." Talani scoffed, crossing her arms. Don't listen to him. He's only saying this because he's broke. Omalara's lips curved into a small, steady smile. Once upon a time, those words would have shattered her, but not anymore. And what does that have to do with me? Ayotunde stepped closer, his voice trembling. I thought maybe we could start over, for Eniola's sake. At the mention of her daughter's name, Omalara's heart flinched, but she didn't let it show. She looked him dead in the eye, her voice calm and unwavering. You left me. You left her. We cried for you, and you never came back. We don't need you anymore. The room went silent. Even Talani's smirk faltered. For the first time, Omalara saw the regret in Ayotunde's eyes. And in that moment, she realized the power she now held. She was no longer the abandoned wife who had begged for answers. She was a woman who had built her own life from the ashes. Omalara picked up her trays, turned to leave, and whispered, You two made your choice. Now live with it. As she walked out with her head high and Eniola's tiny hand in hers, a wave of pride washed over her. This was her victory. In the days that followed the unexpected encounter, Ayotunde began to appear more and more. He came to Omalara's shop under the guise of checking on Eniola, but Omalara knew better. His once proud posture was gone, replaced with desperation. One afternoon, while Omalara was arranging trays of Puff Puff for delivery, he showed up again. Lara, please, he begged, his voice cracking. I lost everything. Talani left me. I've been living with a friend, barely surviving. I just want to make things right for you, for Eniola. Omalara didn't even look up from her work. You had 3 years, Ayotunde. 3 years to come back, but you only remember us now because you have nothing left. Eniola, now a bright and curious 6-year-old, peeked out from the back room. Mummy, who is he? She asked innocently. Omalara's chest tightened. How could she explain to her daughter that this was the man who abandoned them? She simply placed a hand on Eniola's shoulder and said softly, He's just someone from the past, my darling. But Ayotunde wasn't done. He knelt down to Eniola's level, his eyes pleading. I'm your father, Eniola. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? The little girl stared at him blankly, then turned to her mother. Is it true, Mummy? Omalara swallowed hard. This was the moment she had dreaded. But before she could speak, Ayotunde added desperately, I want to be in her life, Lara. I'll do anything. That night, Omalara sat by the window after putting Eniola to bed. Her heart was torn. Part of her wanted to slam the door on Ayotunde forever, but another part, one she hated, remembered the man she once loved, the man who had once held their baby and promised never to leave. As if life wasn't complicated enough, Talani showed up the next day. She looked drained, her pride stripped away. Lara, she said quietly, I'm sorry. Omalara stared at her former best friend, disbelief and anger boiling inside her. Sorry? You betrayed me. You stole my husband and laughed while I struggled. Why now? Talani's eyes filled with tears, because I see it now. He never loved me the way he loved you. And I lost everything too. For a moment, Omalara almost felt pity. But then she remembered the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, clutching Eniola, with no one there to comfort her. She stood tall, her voice firm. I don't need either of you. I built this life without you, and I'll keep building it. Still, Ayotunde's persistence and Talani's regret forced her to confront the question she had avoided for years. Should she shut the door on the past completely, or let him back in for Eniola's sake? And for the first time in years, Omalara realized this choice was hers alone. The following Sunday morning was unusually quiet. Omalara sat at the dining table, staring at the cup of tea in front of her. Eniola sat nearby, humming to herself as she colored in her drawing book. Ayotunde's words from the previous day still echoed in Omalara's mind. Please, Lara, just give me one chance to make it right. She clenched her fists. Once, she would have melted at those words. Once, she would have believed him. But now, she was no longer the helpless woman who begged for his love. She was Omalara, the woman who had faced the storm and learned to dance in the rain. When Ayotunde arrived at her shop later that day, he looked nervous. Lara, he began softly, I've been thinking. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I just want to be a father to Eniola. Let me help. Let me try to fix this. Omalara met his gaze steadily. You don't get to walk in and out of her life whenever you want. She's not a second chance for you, Ayotunde. She's my daughter. I raised her, alone. He swallowed hard, his shoulders slumping. I know, and I regret it every day. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then Eniola peeked out from behind the counter, clutching her favorite doll. "Mummy, is he really my daddy?" Omolara knelt down, holding her daughter's hands gently. "Yes, baby, he is. But you know what? Daddies are supposed to stay." And he didn't. Eniola looked at Ayotunde for a long moment, then turned back to her mother and nodded. "Then we don't need him." Those words hit Ayotunde like a blow, and Omolara felt the final chains of her past breaking. She stood up, her voice calm but firm. "Ayotunde, I will not stop you from seeing her if one day she wants that. But I don't want you in our lives. Not now. Not after everything." Ayotunde's eyes glistened with tears. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He simply nodded, defeated, and turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, Omolara felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in years, she wasn't haunted by what he had done. She wasn't the abandoned wife anymore. She was a survivor, a mother, and a woman who had rebuilt her world with her own two hands. Eniola ran into her arms, and Omolara lifted her high, laughing through her tears. "It's just us, my love, and that's enough." From that day, Omolara decided her past no longer held her captive. Ayotunde's regret and Tolani's apologies were nothing but echoes in a story that no longer defined her. Her transformation was complete. She had chosen herself, she had chosen her daughter, and it was the most powerful choice she had ever made. Weeks turned into months, and Omolara's life blossomed like a flower finally freed from the shade. Her business continued to grow, attracting clients from all over Lagos. What had once started as a roadside hustle now became a thriving catering service, with a small team of women she hired, many of them single mothers like herself, giving them the chance she once desperately needed. One sunny afternoon, as Omolara oversaw a wedding catering event, she stood in a beautiful hall filled with laughter and music. Eniola, now more confident and cheerful than ever, ran around playing with the flower girls, her laughter ringing like bells. Watching her daughter's joy, Omolara felt a warmth in her chest that no betrayal could ever extinguish. "Omolara?" She turned to see Mrs. Adiemi, one of her most loyal clients, smiling proudly. "I've been watching you these past few months. You are remarkable. You turned your pain into something powerful. You inspire us all." Omolara's eyes softened. "Thank you, Ma. I just wanted to give my daughter the life she deserves." And for the first time in a long time, Omolara truly believed it. She had done it. Meanwhile, Ayotunde faded further into the background of her life. He occasionally sent messages asking to see Eniola, but Omolara always left the decision to her daughter. Eniola's answer was always the same. "No, Mummy, we're fine the way we are." Tolani, too, had vanished from the picture. Her once loud and triumphant presence now reduced to silence. It was as if karma had drawn its curtain and ended their part of the story. One evening, Omolara and Eniola sat on the porch of their modest but cozy new home. Eniola rested her head on her mother's lap as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson.
"Mummy?" Eniola asked softly. "Are we happy now?"
Omolara smiled, brushing her daughter's hair tenderly. "Yes, baby, we are happy, because happiness isn't about who stays or who leaves. It's about us and the love we share." Eniola grinned, her little teeth showing, and hugged her tightly. Omolara's heart swelled. In that quiet moment, Omolara realized something profound. The betrayal that once felt like the end of her world was actually the beginning of her true story. Losing Ayotunde had forced her to find her strength. Losing Tolani had taught her who her real friends were, and in the ashes of that heartbreak, she had built something far greater than she ever imagined. Peace. As the stars appeared in the Lagos sky, Omolara whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Not for Ayotunde's regret or Tolani's downfall, but for the woman she had become. She was no longer defined by what was taken from her. She was defined by what she chose to build. And in that moment, Omolara knew. She and Eniola would be unstoppable. Years later, Omolara stood on the stage of a women's empowerment conference in Lagos, her hands clasped around the microphone as the audience waited in silence. She was no longer just Omolara, the woman who had been abandoned. She was Omolara, the business owner, the mentor, and the voice of hope for countless women who once believed their lives were over. She looked out at the crowd. Women of all ages, some holding their children, some sitting alone with tear-streaked faces, and she began. I used to think betrayal was the end, she said, her voice steady, warm, and powerful. My husband left me for my best friend. I had nothing but my daughter and a heart full of pain. But that pain didn't destroy me. It built me. It made me who I am today. The room was silent, hanging on every word. I want every woman here to remember this, Omolara continued. We are stronger than the ones who hurt us. We are not defined by the people who walk away. We are defined by how we rise. Eniola, now 10 years old, stood at the side of the stage, beaming with pride. She had grown up watching her mother turn heartbreak into strength, and she carried that strength in her own spirit. After the conference, women lined up to thank Omolara, some with tears in their eyes. You gave me hope, one woman said, holding her hand tightly. If you could do it, maybe I can too. Omolara smiled, her heart full. You can, she whispered. You just have to start. Later that evening, back at home, Omolara and Eniola sat together at their dining table, sharing a quiet dinner. Their home was warm and filled with laughter. Something Omolara once thought she would never feel again.
Mummy, Eniola said between bites, when I grow up, I want to be just like you.
Omolara laughed, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind her daughter's ear. No, my darling, you will be even greater. And in that moment, Omolara understood the true meaning of her journey. It wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about revenge or proving Ayotunde and Tolani wrong. It was about creating a life so beautiful that the past no longer mattered. The betrayal that once haunted her had become nothing more than a shadow, proof that even in the darkest nights, she had found her light. As she put Eniola to bed that night, Omolara stood by the window, gazing up at the stars. Thank you, she whispered, to God, to fate, and to the unbreakable woman she had become. Because in the end, she didn't just survive, she conquered. And that was the legacy she would leave for her daughter, and for every woman who dared to rise from the ashes. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Subscribe now and join our family for more inspiring stories every day. And if you felt Omolara's strength, type "I believe in second chances" in the comments. Let's fill this space with hope.